everybody, and welcome back to Music Impossible. This is Professor Jim. Welcome to Lesson 4, AP Music Theory. I hope you did well in your test. And if you have questions about it, you can certainly go back and rewatch any of the lesson videos. Nothing in that test wasn't covered in that first week of lessons. Same thing as we go forward. What you're learning today is going to be testable and quizzable in the near future. So this next section we're going to get into is the idea of rhythms, meter, and metric organization. Today, we're going to talk about a little bit about basic note values, the dot, and the tie in this lesson. And so we're going to start off by kind of dispelling the idea that since you were picked up an instrument in 3rd or 4th grade, or whenever you did, that a whole note gets 4 counts and a half note gets 2 counts. Most of the time it does, but that is not always the case. And so we really need to think of music in a little bit of a different way. And we like to use the term relationship of durational symbols. It's a big fancy way of saying that when we look at notes, this is called a note tree, that a whole note and half note relationships, regardless of how they appear and in whatever meter they appear in, a half note is always half of a whole note. So there are twice as many half notes during the same period as one whole note. There are twice as many quarter notes as there are half notes for the same period of time. So if you look at the tree, there's 2 half notes to 1 whole note. There's 4 quarter notes to 2 half notes. There's 8 eighth notes to 4 quarter notes. Notice how we're doubling the number of notes every time. 1 whole note, 2 half notes, 4, 8. And when we get to 16th note, there are 16 16th notes during the same period of time as 8 eighth notes, as 4 quarter notes, as 2 half notes, and 1 whole note. We can even go so far as to show you what a brev looks like. A brev is something that is a double whole note, and a double whole note, we'll just use Sibelius here real quick for that one, a double whole note, and if you're looking for it, you have to go to the keypad to the second sub window here, and it looks just like that. Let's see if we can get one of these plugged in. Oh, you know what we need? You know what we need? We need more than 4 beats in a measure. So we need, let's see, let's come over here. Let's change our time signature to something funky like 8/4 time. Now we can put a brev in there. Let's try that again. If we put it at the beginning of the measure, there it is. So we have 2 bars of 8/4 time, and that's what a brev looks like. So there would be 2 whole notes to 1 brev. There would be 2 half notes to 1, or 4 half notes to 2 whole notes, and so forth. And so you would continue to double the note values as you go. And as you might recognize or realize, if we were to add another row below our 16th notes, there would be 32 32nd notes for the same amount of space as 16 16th notes, as 8 eighth notes, and so forth. Same thing applies, by the way, when we're talking about rests. And if music is the idea of space and time, silence and sound, we have to recognize rests as well. And same thing from the top down, we have a whole rest, followed by 2 half rests, followed by 4 quarter rests, 8 eighth rests, 16 16th rests. You could keep going. There would be 32 32nd rests, 64 64th rests. If you want to get crazy and wild, 128 128th rests. It is a real thing. So that's when we think about breaking down our rhythms, we got to get away from a whole note as 4 counts. A whole note is just a relationship between other notes in that music. So a whole note could be 2 counts in a particular meter. And when we get into more complex meters and other lessons this week, we're going to learn about how these relationships can change and that a whole note isn't just 4 count. So now let's go over and think about dots and ties, and what it means. Now, if you've been playing music long enough, you understand what dots and ties are and how they work. You've heard of maybe dotted quarter notes. You've heard of dotted half notes. What is a dot exactly? A dot is equal to half of any note value. So what does that mean? That means that if I have a dotted whole note, the dot of the dotted whole note is equal to half of the bass note right there, which is a whole note. So if a whole note, let's go get rid of the dot. If a whole note is equal to 4 counts, then a dotted whole note is equal to 4 counts, the bass note, plus half of the note's value. So sorry to do math on you today, but it's not hard math. 4 plus 2, right? 4, half of 4 is 2, is equal to 6. And we can apply that same formula to any dotted note. So if we come here, let's do a dotted half note. We have a dotted half note. Okay, that's going to be equal to the bass note, which is 2, plus half of 2. We can write the formula out if you really need to do that, or you can do it in your head. I'm sure most of you can do it in your head. 2 plus 1. You already knew that a dotted half note usually gets 3 counts, especially in 4/4 time, 3/4 time, any sort of basic simple meter. You're going to have 3 counts. We can keep going with this. Let's see what happens with a dotted quarter note. It's going to be equal to the bass value, quarter note 1, plus half of 1. Half of 1. So that's 1 plus half equal to 1.5 beats. 1.5 beats. And we can do that for every single note as we go. Let's do a simple version here. Let's say we have a dotted eighth note. Eighth note gets half a beat, right? Plus half of a half. Yeah. You guys remember your fractions. That's going to be half plus 1/4. You can trust me on this. But if you want to, you can go ahead and find the common denominator and all that. But that's going to be equal to 3/4 of a beat. So that's why when we have a dotted quarter followed by an 16th note, these are usually barred. Let's go ahead and bar these like that. You get 3/4 of a beat here. A 16th note is equal to 1/4 of a beat. So that's how you get to 1 there. And we could do this here also. We could say let's go with a 16th note, dotted 16th note. That's just going to be equal to a 16th note plus half of a 16th note, which is a 32nd note. All right, and you could add that dot to anything. So essentially that dot is equal to half of whatever the original note's value is. Okay, you may have hated me before with a little bit of math. I'm going to throw a little bit more math at you. So let's take a look at if we have a double dot. So we know that the single dot is half of the bass note value. Why do I put a second dot there? So this, now you have a half note, which is 2 counts. And you have to add the first dot, which we already know is half of the bass note value, half of 2, right? But now we have to add this other dot, and the other half is half of the first dot. So if we're going to write it as a math formula, we would write it like that. So here we have 2 plus half of 2, which is 1, plus half of 2, which comes out to 1/2 if you did the math. So you add it all together, you get 3.5 beats for a double dotted half note. Let's do one more, just because it's really fun to do all this math. Let's do a double dotted whole note. So you're going to have the note value, the bass note value, 4, plus half of 4, plus half of 4. And let's do this math. And what we're going to get here, we're going to get 4 plus half of 4 is 2, plus half of 4 is 1, and a double dotted whole note is 7 counts. So there's the double dotted half note, if you're ever curious about the math for that. So you take the first dot is half of the bass note value. The second dot is half of the first dot. You can think of it that way as well. Now, the only other thing to consider when we're talking about elongating notes is the tie. And when do we use the tie? Well, the tie has to be used during times of when we just kind of run out of beats and we're trying to go over maybe a measure line, a bar line, if you will. So let's say we're in 3/4 time, and as the composer, you're like, hey, I want 3 half notes in a row. Well, you can't do 3 half notes in 3/4 time, right? If I did another half note here, I'd run out of beats. I only get 3 beats per measure. This half note is already taking up beats 1 and 2. I only have 1 beat left. So what I have to do is I have to make a quarter note, followed by a quarter note, tie those together, and then I have room for my other half note here. So beats 1 and 2, and then beats 3 is there, tied over to beat 1 of the next bar, and then I beats 2 and 3 there. So I have 3 different notes here now that are the same value. They take up the same amount of time. But because of the bar line and running out of beats, I have to tie that over a new measure. All right, that's all we have for this first lesson. The next lesson, we're going to get into metric organization. Lots of vocabulary words we're going to introduce, words like duration, meter, subdivision, tempo, and start talking a little bit about simple and compound meters and what those look like. All right, we'll see you next time. Do your work. Have a good day.